Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walk of Shame. I'm your host, Ant Walker, for the Walkout Network. So sorry for the slight delay. Just had to get my coffee going. I'm a late bloomer today, but anyway, so we just had UFC Stockholm wrap up. Alexander Gustafsson walks out of the cage without his gloves. He has declared that he is retired now from mixed martial arts after fourth round rear naked choke loss to Anthony Smith. Um, Not quite sure where you guys want to start on this one, but I'm a bit skeptical about how this retirement is going to take. I mean, we have seen many people retire in mixed martial arts, and they come back. I mean, we just talked about Uriah Faber, who retired after a hometown victory in Sacramento, and now he's going to return in Sacramento against Ricky Simone. So these things do happen a lot in mixed martial arts, and the running joke is that these retirements very rarely stick. And Alexander Gustafsson is still one of the best light heavyweights in the world. Let's keep in mind the names that have beaten him prior to today. The names that have beaten him prior to today have been John Jones, who is arguably the greatest fighter of all time, Daniel Cormier, who's also arguably one of the greatest fighters of all time, and then Anthony Rumble Johnson, who is perhaps the hardest hitter that's ever stepped foot into the cage. So so adding first of all adding Anthony Smith to that list is very good for him, but man, I just don't think Alexander Gustafsson is going to call it quits just yet. I think there's still a lot more for him. And if John Jones does move up to heavyweight, why not? But shout out to Matt Hunter and Tommaso Mark that are in the chat right now, shedding tears over Alexander Gustafsson losing and retiring. The Mauler has been one of the most entertaining fighters of this era. I think. I think he's fantastic to watch. Always has been. He's a guy who, if he existed in another era, we'd be talking about among the all-time greats. I mean, he was this close to defeating John Jones when they first met at, I believe it was UFC 164. In fact, I had him winning that fight when I originally watched it. He was this close to defeating Daniel Cormier at UFC 195, I believe it was. So this is a man who's come so close to defeating greats repeatedly. So you got to feel for him. You really got to feel for him, and I do think it's understandable that he is deciding to look outside of the world of MMA because it's been rough on him. It's been very rough. So let's not rain on Anthony Smith's parade here. So we'll break down exactly, at least from my eyes, what happened in that main event. And please feel free in the chat to give me your thoughts. If you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm right, if you just want to add something else to the mix. So and Tommaso, we will start talking about future fights for some of these guys. So hold your horses on that. But I feel where you're getting at. All right. So the first round, I scored for Anthony Smith. I thought that Gus, was just not doing anything to warrant winning the fight. And that's not to say that Anthony Smith was particularly effective. He was not cutting off the cage, but he was coming forward. So I know everyone loves someone coming forward. I still will shout through a mountaintop that coming forward doesn't mean that you have cage control. I will die on that hill. But anyway, Smith was also switching stances a lot, and I think that was he was attempting to confuse Gustafsson a little bit on the stance switches, and he was doing those stance switches when they were very close range with one another. Man, in fact, I'm not feeling my camera being up here. Let me move this thing real quick. Let me move my camera right there, so that feel a little better. And I can sorry, I gotta move these windows around. Yeah, this feels a little bit better. So sorry sorry about that, everybody. But anyway, man, I think that Smith was he was just a little more active, and that's what ended up winning him that first round. But I do think that was part of the plan. I think that was part of Gustafsson's plan, because you think, okay, maybe you can drown Smith in the later rounds. We've seen Gustafsson go the 5-round distance with in grueling wars a couple of times. Smith, of course, he's coming off of a 5-rounder against John Jones, but let's be honest there, he didn't really do much that fight, so it wasn't a whole lot to actually gas him out. And I think Gustafsson had that in mind. So anyway, you see Gus start to open up a little bit more toward the end of that round. Then the second round starts. Smith was still switching the stances a little bit. He landed a few power shots, but Gus still didn't look like he really turned up the volume just yet. He looked like he was just kind of coasting along. And I really think that was kind of when it was confirmed in my mind. It's like, okay, I think Gustafsson is really, just trying to drain the gas tank. And he wasn't, there were times he wasn't backpedaling as much. He would kind of meet him in the center of the cage. And then I believe the commentary team did point that out at one point, that he was trying to like be a little more aggressive at times and meet him in the middle. So that's when I thought, okay, he's starting to rev that engine up just a little bit, and you're kind of seeing this whole plan playing out. Now the third round is where things got really interesting for me. So Anthony Smith was still, coming up 2 rounds to 0 going into the third, but I think Gus won that third round. He started really opening up. He started landing a lot of clean boxing combinations. In particular, I know he was very fond of trying to land those hooks and uppercuts like he did against Glover Teixeira. He did have a really hard jab too that seemed to stun Smith and make him back up for a second. But man, how beautiful of a round ending that was for him to have that heavy body kick right to the liver, and Smith go down from the pain, and Gus follow him right there, and set up that takedown as Smith was trying to recover from that body kick, and set up some ground and pound and establish strong positioning and side control. That was what I thought was the beginning of the end for Anthony Smith. I thought, okay, it started reminding me of the Jan Blachowicz fight, where Gustafsson just decided, okay, I'm tired of standing up, so now we're going to take it to the ground. And I'm going to I'm going to win the fight that way. And I thought that was what he was going to do. Well, when the fourth round starts up, we saw Gus, still kind of in a good rhythm, and he went for that trip takedown that he likes to land. But when that failed, he goes to the judo throw. But when that failed, and this is a big flaw with judo and mixed martial arts, a lot of times when you go for that throw, if you don't get it, you give up your back. And from there, he gives up the back. Smith was able to get the fight to the ground from there, sets up top control, beats him up a little bit, and goes in for the rear naked choke. So I think for Anthony Smith, a lot of questions were answered. I was of the mind that we didn't know enough about Anthony Smith going into this fight as far as what he looks like at 205. Because you had the Shogun fight, you had the Rashad Evans fight, two guys that are no doubt all-time greats, but they're well past their prime. And in fact, Rashad Evans retired after that fight, if I'm not mistaken. So those didn't really tell us much, except that he hits hard. The Volkan Ozdemir fight just seemed kind of weird to me. It seemed just kind of all over the place, and so I didn't really know what to make of that. And then also we have Ozdemir on his current downturn right now. Granted, I believe he can rebound from that, but still, that was something that I had in mind as far as where to rank Smith with the current crop of light heavyweights. But then the John Jones fight, I mean, he's fighting probably the greatest fighter of all time, and he didn't really do much of anything except try to survive, and that was pretty much it. So I didn't feel like we knew a lot about him at 205, but when you defeat Alexander Gustafsson, even though yes, he was coming off of a loss, but that loss was to John Jones. You look at the like I mentioned before, the guys who have beaten Gustafsson in the past, I mean, though you're talking about a lot of great names. You're talking about guys who are more than anything hold their weight at 205. So hey, I think Anthony Smith adds himself to rarefied air, and whether or not this retirement sticks, regardless, Gustafsson isn't an old guy and isn't washed up by any means. So this is a legitimate win for Anthony Smith, and I think should establish some more clarity as far as the hierarchy of 205 outside of John Jones. So good stuff there. So let me look at a little bit of the chat here as we are talking about the main event. Tomaso Mark says, I feel like he's done. Who else would he fight? Reyes, question mark. He may not have the drive to want to restart a title run. That, I think, is a very valid point. That's something that we should be considering. If Alexander Gustafsson is in fact retired, it is not because he physically can't cut it anymore. If he retires, it's because he just doesn't feel like doing it anymore. And this was quite a long grind. I mean, you think about the road he had to get back to John Jones, and granted, he wasn't the most active as he was dealing with injuries, but he went through a lot. Those injuries included, years apart, for him to finally see John Jones, and then for it to go down the way it did, with all the chaos of the event moving from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, to then also factor in he apparently suffered an injury in the middle of the fight and just really got dominated by John Jones. So that's got to take a lot of wind out of yourselves. And then you fight a guy like Anthony Smith, who on paper should have beaten, that he should have beaten. Anthony Smith on paper does not line up to what we know about Alexander Gustafsson, but still wasn't enough. So Tommaso, I think you make a good point there. It could just be more of a mental thing. It could just be, hey, I don't feel like doing this anymore. I don't want to put myself or my body through this anymore. I think that's a perfectly rational thing. Then that would really be the only reason why he should be retiring. Because it's not from a physical standpoint. It's not like a Rashad Evans where you were great, but now it's clear the sport, your body have just gone in different directions, and you just physically can't do this anymore. So he's far, far from that. All right, let's see what else we got. Matt Hunter is saying post Liddell, Machida, quasi-era mid-2000s to 2011-ish. It was Jones, DC, and Gus who held down the former Golden Division, 205, about to go through another major transition, it seems. Yes, really. And this card, I think, is a good representation of it. We just saw, and we'll talk about this in a second, Jimmy Manuwa just damn near die in front of our eyes. And he was another sort of reliable name in the division. We saw a couple of guys. We saw like the Devin Clark when we saw guys at 205 who might play a factor into the future. So this card felt like a major transition as well. Besides just this fight, just overall, it had a light heavyweight transition arc to it, if you ask me. Let's see what else we got. Shout out to Fugatti as well, who's on the chat. What else we got? The next generation 205, yeah. Dominic Reyes, Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith is part of that. Thiago Santos is part of that as well, who will be challenging John Jones next at UFC 239, I believe it is. I'll be there, but I don't remember what the event number is. All right, let's see what else we got. Matt Wells from the Slip and Dip podcast. What's up, Matt? He asks, do you match up Dominic Reyes and Anthony Smith next, or do you let John Jones get Reyes straight away after Santos? You know what? I honestly don't want to match up Anthony Smith right now. I want him to enjoy some time off. This is something that he wanted before. He was planning on just staying on the sidelines until the end of the year, just to let some nagging injuries heal. And I think just let him take that time. Let some of these things play out already. See, the disadvantage with Anthony Smith and Dominic Reyes is that if you're looking for fresh contenders, Anthony Smith winning that fight against Dominic Reyes, do we want to see him fight John Jones again? I think the collective answer is no. I don't think that a rematch offers anything. Now, if we start talking about Jones moving away from the division, then yes, then we can start kind of killing off contenders essentially with Anthony Smith. Earlier today, I was saying Rakic versus Glover Teixeira, should be next, but I'm starting to think Anthony Smith versus Glover Teixeira makes a lot more sense, and I see Matt Hunter agreeing with that position. I think that makes much more sense, Smith versus Glover, simply because you don't want to kill off a contender, and those are two guys who have previous losses to John Jones. So it's like if either of them win, if it's emphatic enough, if the division moves in a certain kind of way, all right, yeah, maybe one of those guys can move themselves right back up there. But without that, I don't want to set up rematches that we don't want. I mean, if he earns a shot there, if he earns a shot back, cool. But I don't want to kill off Reyes. Not yet. Let's see. Smith really dislikes Luke Rockhold. I'd like to see that fight. Yeah, that's from Kindle 33 to King. Yeah, that's another name that we really should be paying attention to at 205 is Luke Rockhold. Rockhold is fighting at UFC 239. Please remind me who he is fighting. I'm off the top of my head. I cannot remember. I want to say it's Jan Blachowicz. I think it's Jan Blachowicz, but I could definitely be wrong on that. But yeah, man, Luke Rockhold and Anthony Smith sounds like a great time to me, but I still think Luke Rockhold is a guy that if he beats Blachowicz, just throw him into the title shot. Thanks, Tommaso. Just throw him into the title shot because you have the name, you have what could be an interesting style matchup, and you have the story to sell. So I think it hits the mark on all points for us, purists of the sport, purists of martial arts and competition. Rockhold will make sense being a former 185-pound champion in the UFC and Strikeforce, and his style from a business standpoint. He's a marketable name. He's a guy we recognize and casual fans might care about a little bit. And there's a storyline to sell between the rivalry with John Jones and Daniel Cormier, and Rockhold being a close friend of Cormier and teammate at American Kickboxing Academy. That's just something you can sell. In addition to being a legitimately great fight that you can put together. So, all right, let's see. Tommaso and the winner, Luke and Jan have to face Smith first. Yeah. Luke should get the title shot if he beats Jan. Smith versus Glover. Yes. Reyes versus Corey Anderson. I'm not mad at that. From Matt Hunter saying this, I'm not mad at Reyes versus Corey Anderson. But still, Corey Anderson, it's kind of like in this no man's land. I almost wish, and Matt, I know you might remember this. I went on the chat of your show one time, Mixed Combat Radio. Check that out. They'll be doing a broadcast for the Anthony Joshua and Ruiz Jr. fight. So please check out the homies at Mixed Combat Radio. But anyway, I was on that chat one time, and I suggested right before UFC 230 was official with Cormier versus Derek Lewis, I was saying, hey, just throw Corey Anderson in there with his title shot against Daniel Cormier. He's kind of earned a shot at this point, just judging by his win-loss record. Might as well do it. I mean, it's not the sexiest matchup. It's not something that we really have high hopes for, but just give it to him, man. Just give it to him. And you kind of would have that out of the way. And this is why, because now you still have Corey Anderson. You still have Corey Anderson out there who, from a business perspective, is not the guy that they necessarily want to put in that position. He's not necessarily the guy you want there, but he's kind of earned it. So if we just had that out of the way, we wouldn't be dealing with this now, because Corey Anderson against Dominic Reyes it could potentially be a tough style matchup for Reyes. It really could be. So killing off Reyes for a guy that the promotion's been very resistant to really get behind just sounds crazy, man. Should have just given it to him when they had the chance and just kind of get it out the way. But so here we go. All right. All right. So we definitely can return to some of the next moves that we have at 205. But let's start talking about some of the rest of this event. I mean, Jimmy Manawa versus Alexander Radic, Well, my pronunciation is so trash right now, but it's really not a lot to talk about. I mean, yeah, Manawa just almost died in front of us. Like that's, and I think now, well, two things. One, I think it's time for Reddick to be considered among the top guys in the division. It's time for him to get a top 10 matchup. Let me take a look at some of these rankings right here and see what I think he can offer, what we can offer him as far as matches go. Um, yeah, Ozdemir's without a guy. I'd throw him in there against maybe an Ozdemir. That will make some sense. As far as Jimmy Manawa, man, I think it's time to hang it up. I think it's time. Manawa is now what 4-fight losing streak. 3 out of those 4 losses have been brutal knockouts. Yeah, and he's an older guy too. He's a guy who got into martial arts very late. I don't really see the point of him doing this anymore. I mean, of course, he's a guy that can always be put on a European card, and he can get some butts and seats. And we understand that, but I just don't think it makes any sense anymore to for him to fight. You know, not sure what he does next, but just for his brain health, man. At the very least, take some time off. At the very least, I don't want to see him for another year. Um, and then you start talking about his age, another year off. Not the best right there, because he's a guy who should be at the tail end of what his body can achieve athletically. He should be at that end if he hasn't reached it already. But as far as Rakic, man, yeah, you're talking about a guy who we need to start taking very seriously now. As if the Devin Clark win didn't show it enough, man. This is a guy that we need to be very, very serious about. Yeah. So, all right. Let's see what else we got. Yeah. Michael Americani versus Chris Fishgold. Man, this was a beautifully chaotic fight, man. Those scrambles, I love scrambles. That's something that always makes me happy to watch is a good scramble. And they had him for days. I will say that that finish by Americani was fantastic. That was fantastic. I really love that. Really love to see that anaconda choke and the way he kind of just kept walking out with it and sinking in that choke deeper and deeper, man. Good stuff by Americani. Yeah, man, this is his featherweight division is looking pretty nice too. Where would you guys pair up Americani next? I, off the top of my head, am not so sure what we do with him next, but I guess let me take a look at these rankings as well. Yeah, and Elkins is got a fight coming up. Yeah, if Elkins gets to that, why not? I kind of like that matchup. Yeah, so there's some good stuff at featherweight for those guys. All right, now let's take a look at what we have from there. Damir Hadzovic versus Christos Gallegos. Yeah, I mean, Hadzovic just too little, too late, man. I know I say that phrase a lot during some of these post fight wrap ups, but too little, too late, man. He won that last round, but it just wasn't enough, man. Gallegos was really controlling a lot of the positioning. He was landing those takedowns, although he wasn't able to hold him down much. He still kept getting the takedowns. I thought the striking for the most part was fairly even in the first round, but by the second round, I think Gallegos started pulling away with that advantage a bit more. Yeah, man, and I would say both the guys were extraordinarily tired. They were worn out. So I was very surprised. They didn't just collapse at the end of the fight. Like those guys were tired as all hell. So good stuff on that end. Enjoyable fight. Love some of the activity there, even though the gas tanks were lacking. All right, David Tamer versus Sun Banjo to open up the main card. David Tamer gets his first UFC win, and I definitely didn't see that coming. Sun Banjo coming in undefeated. I believe he came into this fight 9-0 and his UFC debut, and I think the UFC debut is what killed him, man. I think it was octagon jitters. Like Joe was very, very inactive this whole fight. Like he didn't really do much of anything. And he allowed Tamer to start doing stuff, and it's just never a good look. It's just never a good look. I mean, Tamer has shown himself to be rather ineffective in the UFC so far. So I don't know what to make of this win for him. I mean, it keeps him around the promotion at least for one more shot, but I just I don't really see the upside. Um, he'd have to turn things around pretty dramatically in his next one. I think if he drops a decision his next one, I think the UFC is gonna boot him out of there because he isn't necessarily the most exciting guy in the world. He's shown a tendency to get finished and hard time winning. Not really much benefit to keeping him in the promotion unless you just want a Swedish guy there for the one time a year or one time every other year that they go to Sweden. I mean, that's kind of it, really. So the first round, I thought Tamer started off strong. He was very aggressive, but I do think Joe was able to survive just by simply reversing position at a couple of crucial points. And he also didn't fade after getting hurt in that opening round. He got caught with a couple big bombs, and that didn't stop what he wanted to. It didn't stop him from functioning. I should say, and put it that way before I misspeak. In the second round, it just came down to more just inactivity by Joe, just not really doing anything at all. And Tamer wasn't really effective in his own right. He didn't really land a whole lot of stuff. I guess he mixed. He confused Joe with some grappling, which kind of threw him off, according to the commentary team that were monitoring his corner. But it was nothing really there. I mean, in the last round, Tamer was able to land some big shots, but Sun Banjo still didn't do anything. He didn't. He barely threw any jabs, and you see the height and reach advantage, and you think jab seems to be the simple thing that you turn to get it done. He didn't do it. And I think that is all octagon jitters, man. I think he stepped in there under the big lights, and it just wasn't what he was used to. It wasn't, I forget the name of the promotion that he came from, but it wasn't on that scale. It was much bigger, and they're in Ericsson Globe Arena in Sweden. The Swedish fans are nuts, and they're there for all these Swedish guys on the card, including David Tamer. And yeah, I think the moment got to him. So I'm curious of what he does in his next fight, but I think he rebounds. Tamer, on the other hand, I don't think they'd have to do some very, very generous matchmaking for Tamer to get a win and stick around in the promotion, in my eyes. All right, so we'll briefly go through a little bit of the prelims, and then I'll go back to the chat and address some of the comments as far as the future of 205 in particular. So Rustom Ockman versus Sergey Khandhas. Man, I'm sure I butchered that. Had it even going into the final round, Sergey gets the win. Not really much to say about this fight except that rolling with Ockman must be like just laying on a pad of just a whole bed of Brillo pads, because man, the body hair was out of control. Tanya Evinger versus Lena Landsberg. Landsberg, just pure domination, man. It's a shame for Tanya Evinger. Tanya Evinger, for those who were not watching her in Invicta, man, she was a dominant champion there. She should have been in the UFC at that point. She was putting in work on a lot of those ladies there. And for her to get to the UFC and go 0-3 really sucks. I mean, the first fight, the Cyborg fight, you get that. Like, she was brought in as a sacrificial lamb. It's a shame that it's really a shame that was her introduction to UFC fans, was being a sacrificial lamb for Chris Cyborg, but those are breaks. And for Aspen Ladd to dominate her at UFC 229, was really shocking. I not surprised that Lad won, but just very surprised that that she did it in such a dominant fashion, and then Lena Landsberg to dominate her as well. And the thing that I find most troubling about Tanya Evinger's losses is that she used to be the one dominating with the grappling. She used to be the one that would get in your face, get you bloody, beat you up, take you down, and just roughhouse you. That was her game, and now that game is being applied to her, and that is a bad sign. She is a long-suffering veteran of mixed martial arts, and I believe she's like 37 years old too. So you got to think the end is coming near for her as an active fighter. But man, I want to see Tanya Evinger at least get one UFC win just to say that she had one. And I think, like, when I think back to like Julie Ketzie's career and all that Julie Kedzie did for women's mixed martial arts, and for her to go winless in the UFC, or you think about like Shayna Baszler and some of the original pioneers of women's mixed martial arts that were top ranked and championship quality fighters, but they were there before the big lights. They were there before the big show. They were there before, you know, the average fan really gave a damn about women's mixed martial arts. So it's a shame that it looks like Evinger is headed in that direction. Leonardo Santos versus Stevie Ray. Wow. Santos, man, was off for almost 3 years and just gave a middle finger to ring rust. Just, I mean, I love to see, one of my favorite parts about boxing is a pull counter, to see a straight punch come at you, you fade away, and you come back with a big counter. I love to see that. And you don't see it that often in mixed martial arts, but man, when you see it, it is gorgeous. And Santos landed a gorgeous pull two counter on Stevie Ray and put him out. I just hope Leonardo Santos can stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, he's 39 years old right now, I believe. Maximize that time that he has in the sport. 39 years is that's elderly in the lightweight division, in a very stacked, brutal, violent, and just skilled and dominating lightweight division. You don't want to be an old man there, not at all. So maybe this time off, Santos was able to heal up some injuries that may have been lingering outside of the catastrophic injuries that kept him out of the cage. Maybe. I hope so. Yeah, I just love to see that. And I mean, Leonardo Santos finished Kevin Lee. He just beat the crap out of everybody he's fought just about. I mean, Adriano Martinez still, you know, a nasty head kick knockout on that end. I want Santos to stay healthy, maximize that time, and yes, throw him right in the top 10. Throw him in the top 10. There's no point in holding this guy back. You don't know how long you're going to have him. Throw him to the wolves, please. And I think that's what he wants as well. All right, Nick Hine versus Frank Camacho. Frank Camacho, whoa, man, you talking about domination, man. You talk about execution of a game plan at the highest level. This was fantastic what Camacho was able to do. The body kicks, he just went all in with the body kicks, all in with those body kicks, and he just kept landing them. Hine is dropping those hands, and you think that the head kick is coming, but he didn't throw the head kick. Instead, as Hine is trying to close the distance and implement some of his judo, he's trying to close that distance and crowd those body kicks. You see Camacho responding with the uppercuts. Nuts. I loved it. And I think once that pattern was established, I think Hine was toast at that point. He just really didn't know what to do. So it's like, okay, if I stay at distance, I get kicked to the body. If I close in and try to throw hands with him, I'm getting countered. If I close in and try to go for a clinch and a throw, I get countered. So it's kind of like this no man's land. It's like, what do you do? Where do you go at that point? And for Hine to reach that point and just have no idea what to do, man, Camacho just capitalized. And yeah, good stoppage too by the ref by stopping it before Hine dies and drops on the floor. Like, we need more standing TKOs in mixed martial arts. So Might, definitely was a case to stop it a little sooner, but not much sooner. I think that was a good performance by the ref. The Malecki and Duda Santana fight was just not good. That just wasn't a good fight. They clearly very, very inexperienced. I believe they came in with like a combined record of like 5-0 or something like that. I mean, this wasn't UFC level. It just simply wasn't. And I don't know what UFC level means anymore. This something that I have definitely talked about before. It's something that I've written about. I know I have an old op-ed on Sherdog talking about that shortly after Lorenz Larkin lost to Lima in Bellator. I think it was right after that fight. So yeah, man. That fight wasn't good. Devin Clark and Darko Stosic was a very good fight. That was an exciting fight. Another one important to the future of 205. I think Stosic. That was a close fight. Stosic, I don't think deserved the win. I did definitely had that for Clark. I mean, Clark dropped him a couple times and stuff, so that should have been a clear-cut decision. But Stosic wasn't out of it. Stosic was very competitive, and I think he'll be back. That was a good one there. And let me look at, because I was not taking notes on the first fight because I was washing dishes. I fell asleep before I could do some housework. Didn't want my wife yelling at me. So Joelle Alvarez defeating Danilo Bilardo to open up the fight with a second round TKO via ground and pound. That was a good performance by him. And Bilardo, he'll be back. I mean, this was Octagon debuts, for at least for Bilardo it was. Yeah, man, I like to see some of these European fighters developing under the UFC. I'm enjoying it, and should be some good stuff from both of these guys in the future. I've got high hopes for that. All right, so let's go and address this chat, and before I wrap things, because I didn't want to be on all afternoon. I do have some writing to do, and I will get set to watch the Joshua and Ruiz fight. All right, let's see here. Tommaso with the comments. Let's see. Says Corey should have accepted the Rockhold fight. Weird, he turned it down. Yeah, I wonder what the reasoning was behind that. That's not a story I followed very closely, but I mean, Corey Anderson, that's a fight you gotta take, man. Unless you physically can't, it's a fight you gotta take. Let's say maybe they were trying to lowball him on his pay or something, but big spotlight against a guy like Rockhold. Yeah, if I'm Corey Anderson's camp, I say take that fight as well. Outside of any circumstances we're not aware of. Let's see. Saying offering Volcom, Vulcan now to be a banger. Yeah, we talked about that. Jimmy Manawa versus Johnny Walker. Hell no. I mean, if Manawa wants to stay active, okay, but that just sounds like execution right there. That just sounds like a slaughter. Now, when you think about what Dana White said after UFC 235, I believe it was, where Johnny Walker knocked out Misha Serkinov, where he said they wanted a slow build for Johnny Walker. Yeah, I guess a guy like Manawa would make sense, but it just for Manawa, no, don't take that fight, man. Like, that's just not a good look at all. Like, that's when you're getting knocked out this frequently. Johnny Walker is not the guy, and we shouldn't even talk about Jimmy Manawa fighting again, at least until the end of the year. At least, I'm sorry, the beginning of 2020. He doesn't need to fight anymore in 2019. Just cancel that. Cancel that thought. Yeah, saying Cub Swanson be a good matchup for. Let me see what fight were we talking about there. I think that's when we were talking about the Amir Rakhani fight. Yeah, I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at Cub Swanson. Brian Ortega was mentioned also by Kendall 33 the King. I wouldn't go Ortega. Ortega's too close to the top, way too close to the top. Santos Lynn, the same counter that finished Burgos versus Qatar. Good observation there. Santos versus James Vick. Yes, I like that. I think that's not a bad area to start. I would even put Santos against someone higher ranked than James Vick. James Vick right now sits at 15 on the UFC rankings. I think you put him in. I wouldn't mind seeing him up against a Paul Felder. I wouldn't mind seeing him up against Ali Quinta. I think Ali Quinta, that's the guy. That's a fight. That'll be a good one to watch right there. So Ali Quinta, or if he's still, I'm sure he's still banged up from the Cerrone fight. If Santos wants to get in there like right back, maybe throw in Edson Barboza. I'll take that. I'll definitely take that one. Let me see what else we got on the chat here. Do you think when guys go on losing streaks, the UFC is justified in renegotiating with and lowering pay, or should they stick to the contract regardless? I believe they should stick to the contract regardless. To renegotiate to pay someone lower is, I mean, that's a big fuck you. That's a huge fuck you. I can't co-sign that, because if that's the case, then just cut the guy. If you don't want to pay him, you don't want to pay him. He's still taking years off of his life, getting battered in the head. Just pay the man. I think that's I don't like that at all. I get from a business perspective why that would be an option on the table, but essentially to sit a guy down after you've agreed to the contract, a contract that they can just void at any time they want anyway. Shout out to Elias Theodorou. Doesn't really make much sense to then sit them down and be like, okay, we're gonna pay you less now, in the middle of this contract that we negotiated already. No, because they would be up in arms about, and they always do get up in arms when someone wants to renegotiate to get paid more. They get up in arms about that. So to renegotiate to pay less is horribly predatory behavior. I can't co-sign that at all. Tomas was saying, I thought they were bringing Walker on slow. That's why I say Jimmy. Yeah. I figured that's why you said that. And that's a fair point. I'm just going under the assumption that Jimmy Manawa is not going to be in this much longer. When I say much longer, I would be very surprised if we don't get a retirement announcement within a week from him, because that's the level of destruction that his body has gone through on this losing streak. And yeah, it's just it's really frightening. Actually, I think I don't want to see that. Leonardo Santos versus Alex Hernandez. I'm not mad at that at all. Not mad at that at all. Like, the cool thing about lightweight is that you can mix and match these guys up so much. And even though the rankings wise, Alexander Hernandez is lower ranked than I would prefer Leonardo Santos to be fighting, that's still an exciting fight. And that's the only reason why it was thumbs down on the James Vick thing is just because of the rankings. So with that in mind, yes, okay, Hernandez would be too low ranked, but man, any combination of any of these guys, sign me up. I'm watching. Yeah, I love it, man. I love what the lightweight division is offering everybody. So, yeah, and saying 55 is stacked, they could all beat each other. Very true. That is very true, and that's why we keep turning to lightweight to talk about, because it's fantastic. So anything, even questions outside of this event, please drop them in the chat. I'll stick around for a couple more minutes if we get some more questions before I start a long day of writing and a long day of watching more people punch each other in the face for money. And I haven't even eaten yet, so fix some breakfast, and I'm having my afternoon cup of coffee because I finally got some creamer, so that's what's up. All right, cool. So we'll just go ahead and wrap this up. But want to thank everyone for jumping in the chat with questions and comments. Please like and subscribe, share it, tell a friend to tell a friend, and to tell them to tell 10 more friends. Please jump on board for all this. And for everybody who wants more fight content later in the day, my friends at Mixed Combat Radio will be doing a show for the Anthony Joshua versus Ruiz Jr. fight, and I will be tuned into that. I'll probably jump in on the chat, say some snarky remarks, and yeah, man, should be fun. Oh, Tommaso, question: what is the piece you've written that you're most proud of? Two pieces that I've written that I'm most proud of. The first was, I think it was called My Guilty Plea, and it was about the UFC 229 brawl, and more so after taking a few days away from that to just say it wasn't really that big of a deal, and that we still are going to watch this no matter how outraged we pretend to be. That was one of my favorites, and then my most recent one that I really enjoyed writing, and will definitely say I'm proud of, is a piece about One Championship's new management rule, which I think it was called One Big Problem. So you can find those on Sherdog.com under the features. I've got my own author page on there, so go drop down, check that out. So as far as what's coming up, you can go on Sherdog.com, read my latest mailbag column, Ask Ant. I believe this is Ask Ant, the $27.45 million edition. I think that's what this one's called. So obviously I'll be talking about the Yoel Romero judgment. I'll be talking I talked about the perception of promoters as human beings as well in that. So please go ahead, check that out. Drop your comments on that as well. The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, my normal post-fight column. I'll be writing about UFC Stockholm. I'm going to start writing that probably right after I fix some breakfast and sit down for a second. So that will be live, should be tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon at the latest. That should be out. Hell, it might be up later tonight if I write it fast enough, or if I just like focus and do my work like I should. Other than that, MMA on Point, got a couple videos there. You can check out the playlist on my Walkout Network page that you're on right now, and you'll be able to see the links to my MMA on Point videos. And yeah, so that will about do it. Check out The Trenches with myself and Jason Burgos on Sherdog.com's YouTube page Thursday evening. Or actually Wednesday. We're going to go Wednesday because PFL is Thursday. Yeah, and I got a lot more content, video content for Sherdog.com coming up in the very, very near future, actually starting next week. So please check that out. Definitely want to say love you all and appreciate your participation. So you know what you got to do. You got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive. You got to drink your coffee and eat your breakfast all in the middle of the afternoon if that's what you choose. And, of course, through every bit of it, through it all, you've got to stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. And peace.